if I had continued going the way that I was, I'm pretty sure I would have ended up in the hospital due to stress. I wasn't sleeping. I was about to claim bankruptcy. For me, it was a huge wake-up call to slow things down because I was just not doing well. When I was not doing well, my business was also not doing well. At the end of the day, what it comes back to is if you're currently miserable, what's the point?
Welcome to the Work Less, Play More podcast for busy entrepreneurs who are ready to ditch the hustle, stop burning out on busy work, and get back to having a life. My name is Lindsay Johnson, aka The Radical Connector, and I've spent the last 10 years teaching first-time entrepreneurs how to get customers and make money. Listen in as I chat with other hustle recovering business owners as we share our top tips for, you guessed it, working less and playing more. Let's do this. Today, we're hanging out with Sarah Taylor, owner of Fitness by Sarah Taylor, a virtual fitness studio for plus-size women. Sarah is a personal trainer, former Miss Plus Canada, plus-size model, TV personality, and motivational speaker. You can catch her on breakfast television and Cityline on a regular basis and working out with brands like Sport Chek, Nike, Pennington's, and Lululemon. She's also a contributor to Self Magazine, and last year, Glamour Magazine named her one of the top 31 women fitness Instagram accounts to follow. Sarah has learned the importance of work-life balance in this virtual work-from-home world and has pivoted multiple times in her journey as an entrepreneur who wears many hats. Sarah is on fire to help women along their journey to self-love and build their confidence and strength, mind, body, and soul. Listen in as we talk about how you can tune into your inner strength and build your confidence to design a life and business you love. After all, if you're not doing what makes you happy, what's the point? Welcome, Sarah. Oh my goodness. I am so glad that we are having this conversation today. How are you doing?
I've had better days, but I'm alive in here. Happy to talk to you.
Why don't you tell us why, Sarah?
Well, I found out in January that I was pregnant and it was not planned. And I'm pretty sure that if I didn't have a baby by accident, I probably would have never got pregnant as a business owner because that was my focus. I also found out about a month ago that it's a girl, which explains why I have been sick for 6 months.
You've had a heck of a time. It has been vertigo. It has been intense nausea. It has been exhaustion. For somebody who is a trainer and is very active and whose job relies on you being physically active and training other women, this kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's been a massive adjustment. I struggled with it for the first little while. And the first until 12 weeks, we didn't tell people publicly. Our moms knew, but that was about it. But I had to have a brave face. And I literally would be on the couch all day long, nausea AF. And then I would pull myself together to teach class at 6 o'clock, 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because that is something that I think is very real for a lot of entrepreneurs. This sense of there's how I really am, and then there's how I have to show up.
That was a mind game for me because I pride myself on being super authentic, and it was really hard to keep this massive secret. So when it came to, because I'm very active on social media as well, I started off as an influencer and a model. So I was very careful not to be posting over glamorized anything. I just wasn't posting. And I would show up for my clients who were paying for a service, but it was hard not to say anything. I did end up telling some of the core girls because they were like, you don't seem yourself, because I am very animated and engaging. And I would have to stop and breathe while I was teaching classes, fan blowing on me, just trying not to throw up. And I finally had to tell a couple of them a couple weeks before I announced, because it was just like, I can't hold this in any longer. And this is hard.
And it does. It makes it even harder when there are these things going on that you can't talk about. And, your community, I think a lot of entrepreneurs who build communities, they are used to having this authentic, real relationship. And so you already feel like you're hiding something, but then also you don't have the benefit of having their compassion or excitement or support. They don't have your back.
So my partner is not a very public person. So if it was up to me, I would have shared early on, but out of respect for him, he just wanted to make sure the baby was okay. And I respected that. And it's not just me in the equation. So that was a bit of a difference, because if it was up to me, I just would have shared the whole thing, because God forbid, if I did miscarry, then I would have support and I would be able to help take the stigma away from it, because there are so many women who struggle with infertility. So for me, I would have talked about it, but I just wanted to respect my partner's wishes and that kind of thing.
That's another thing that I think is really relatable for entrepreneurs, this idea of there's how I want to run my business and how I want my business to fit into my life. And when you're partnered, you have to make a lot more allowances for the really, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Do I not even need to finish that sentence? What were you going to say?
Oh, it's exactly what it is. Like, even when it came to doing our pregnancy announcement, he's
Yeah.
like, what is that? Like, why? And I was like, it's a big deal. But it's just not also he's 6 years older than me. So he's not of the generation of the influence, but even still, like most of my friends before, like I was an influencer, they did baby announcements and that kind of thing, but it's just not something that he thought of, and it's not his lifestyle, and he'd keep everything private if he could. That's just how he is.
So if we touch on that idea there, that influencer idea, that is something that I have seen. I've gotten the pleasure of guiding a lot of my students through, where in the beginning of starting a business, they want to make the business the focal point and they want to hide behind the scenes. And it is this progression that happens where they get more courageous to put themselves out there. For you, it was almost the opposite. You were an influencer first, a model first, right? Spokesperson first, and then the business came after. If you were to some advice or a tip for people who feel like they really struggle with being considered an influencer or the face of their business, what would you give them for advice?
I think especially in a service, not even just a service-based business, but any business in this day and age, people want to know who they're buying from. And I think when you can show up authentically and be yourself, it allows people to trust you, like for like tiny little bits of trust. Like, for example, I did a closet sale this past weekend. You had to like request access to a separate Facebook account. I sold almost everything in 3 hours, but these women trust me and that they're actually going to get their product. I'm not a store, but that they're actually going to get what they paid for. I'm not just going to take their money and go. And I think like that's a tiny little example of trust beyond just like transactional sales into your business. And it also opens the lines of communications to talk to your ideal client. So for me, in the business that I'm in, I pride myself on knowing what it's like to be a plus size woman who's intimidated by the gym or who has struggled with confidence and has actually walked through it. And my clients trust me because they know I've walked through it and I've been very vocal about my journey. Does it mean it's easy to talk about the fact that I was abused emotionally and sexually? No, but I also took the time to heal to get to that place. But I now can make authentic connections with women and actually help them walk through some of the things that I might have gone through in the past and can help them walk through on the other side of healing.
Two very important things you said right there, which is that when you did the work and you did the healing, and we hear that a lot, right? Do the work, did the healing. It allowed you to show up differently for people in your community who are in that same place. But you also talked about how vulnerable it was to actually share that kind of stuff. And that's something that I'll often tell people as well, which is there's a difference between being vulnerable, being authentic and being real, and feeling unsafe in the way that you share your trauma. And that you don't owe anybody your trauma. And it is about how do you be vulnerable and real, but still make sure that you feel safe. And I think it's that feeling safe component that holds a lot of people from really putting themselves out there.
And I think so for me, it's not like I haven't publicly shared the details of what like the sexual abuse is probably the most difficult side of the abuse, but it's not like I've publicly shared what's happened. I've shared that it did happen. This is how I was affected and I had to walk through healing and now I'm here. So I think you also have to put boundaries in place of like how much you'll share in what context. And I didn't share about that piece until I was in front of a small group of people and I had to gradually grow my audience in sharing that piece. So the first time I actually shared about that actually happening was at Montreal Plus Fashion Week. I was a model at the event, but then they also had workshops. And so it was the first time that I shared that piece and was able to talk about it in a small group of intimate women, not on a stage of 1,500 people or on a TV show. I came later and I've shared on breakfast television and Cityline what my story is, but it was gradual and I had to be comfortable enough. I also had to be healed so that I wasn't re-triggered.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So really for those listening, it's all about make sure that you are at a point in your healing that it won't be triggering talking about it. Start small in spaces where you feel safe and you feel that the audience will be able to hold the space for you and be able to meet your energy, meet you where you're at, and you're not going to feel overexposed or unsafe. And then as you get more comfortable, that will grow.
Exactly. Like I don't share that piece when I speak in schools to young kids. Know your audience. I also don't share necessarily about that with men. I also don't typically speak to audiences of men. I typically speak to audiences of women. And I think for me, when I won Miss Plus Canada, so that was the first time that I really shared my story. And that was my talent as spoken word. for me, it was the realization of I didn't get through what I got through to sit down and keep my mouth shut.
Yes.
So I really believed that my purpose in life is to share what happened, but also share what happened on the other side of healing.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people will look and be like, oh, Sarah has her stuff together. And it was like, it's been 10 years of healing. It's been a journey to get here. And that's why I always referred to it as a journey to self-love.
Yeah.
Because it really has been a journey. It's still a commitment to healing. I still, in my relationship, things come up from my past and I have to deal with. So it is that conscious, I didn't get through what I got through to just be quiet about it. Yeah. I really felt that I was called to share what I went through to help other women. But at the same time, you have to be authentic to you. So I've met other people who have been through similar things as me. They don't feel called to share their story. So if you don't feel called, don't share that part. Share something else. So I think you have to learn and really be in tune with yourself to know what you can share, what's important to share. And if it doesn't feel authentic to you or still feels too to do it, don't do it. Right? Just because someone else is, or just because I am, doesn't mean you have to.
The basis of what you do, it is the foundation of what you do. But for other people, it isn't. For example, if I were to talk about my business, so the Radical Connector, the radical in my name comes from radical self-acceptance, wanting to use entrepreneurship as a vehicle for radical self-acceptance. A lot of that comes from my own abuse growing up and the lack of self-acceptance and how I had to learn to give it to myself, and how I see how much that changes the way that we function and relate to other people and our quality of life. But I don't talk about that because that's not what the foundation of my business is. It's how do we move forward from that? But there are times one-on-one with people or in small groups where I might bring that up when it's appropriate. So I think it's that balancing act of we all have a history and we all have things that we've overcome. And there's a time and a place where it serves you and serves your audience and when it doesn't, and really feeling your way into that.
Yeah. And I think that's the importance of being in tune with yourself. And I'm glad I got to the place that I was in tune with myself before I started the business, because then it made making decisions easier on what I would and would not do and what I would and would not talk about. And if you're whatever kind of business you have, you don't have to talk about your past. It's not necessary, but people do want to see the face of who they're spending their money with. And I think that's what it comes down to, is whatever that looks like for you, figuring out what that is and what you're comfortable with. But I think the other thing too is it can be a lack of confidence. I've heard from a lot of business owners. I actually just did a call with somebody 2 weeks ago with a bunch of her clients. And it was, how do you just be confident, like sharing what you do? And I think the biggest thing is so many people overthink it, and you just have to lead out of a place of confidence. Yeah. You are a business owner. You do what you do, just walk it out in confidence.
And I feel like that's easy for you to say. I think there'll be a lot of people listening saying that same thing, or thinking that same thing, because as you said, you were at a place of such in tuneness with yourself and confidence with yourself. It made it easier to show up in your business that way. Not that there still isn't imposter syndrome and self-doubt and things that obviously creep in. But if somebody here listening is saying, okay, Sarah, that's really great for you, but I am paralyzed by self-doubt right now and I cannot shake it. Do you have a tip for somebody to be able to shake it and get back into confidence?
Yeah, I think you have to start with you. And so you have to do some work on yourself to get to the place on improving your confidence. It has nothing to do with your business. So some of the things that I use regularly is affirmations. It was how I learned to love myself. I started re-recording the negative tape that I played in my head with something positive, and I still use them to this day. So when I was struggling with my business, I went from affirmations about who I was in my body to about me as a business owner. So if that's what you're struggling with, whatever it is you're struggling with, start re-recording that negative tape that plays and replace it with something positive. The other thing is like to put it into perspective about walking confidence. Yes, I worked really hard on it, but I'm a plus size woman who is a personal trainer and gym owner. So a plus size woman in an industry where they're typically very thin, right? So, and I'm saying I had to just own it rather than thinking about, some of it is a little bit fake it till you make it. I don't feel like I had to fake it because I was confident when I was in it, but I've gone to conferences that are just for fitness professionals, been the only plus size person in the room, and on purpose stood up and answered a question and started with, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a plus size personal trainer and gym owner, because I wanted to make it known. I know who I am and what I'm doing, and I'm creating my own lane. So I'm saying that to put into perspective that you can be the only kind of person in your industry and still rock it, right? And it's possible. It does start with you on the inside.
And you had posted something I had seen of yours recently talking about this experience of being a plus size personal trainer, thin size world, a straight size world. And most people would not know about this about me, but I actually went to school to be a personal trainer. In my early 20s, I was obsessed with fitness and training and kinesiology and the way the body moved. And I was a plus size athlete, plus size trainer, all these things. And I had really great opportunities through my school to apprentice and work in these really neat organizations and thrived and loved it. But when it came time for me to go and try to find a job or work in that industry, that space, I would go into gyms, I would go into fitness places and talk to them about my experience, my background, and they would just look at me like I had three heads.
And that's part of why I didn't go work for somebody else. I just opened my own space because I was like, I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah. Like I could feel them ripping up the resume in their heads before I even, and I remember just feeling so ridiculous and thinking, who's going to want to hire me? I think that drives a lot of people into entrepreneurship is carving their own path. But then when they get there, they realize those thoughts are still there.
Yeah. And that's why you have to do the internal work to not be there. Yeah. And if they do happen, and then it's finding tools in your tool belt to work through those things and overcome those things. Otherwise, you're just going to drown and then you're going to quit.
And I loved what you said about affirmations. I'm a big affirmation person as well. I'm also a big believer in not going from total lack of confidence into all of a sudden this affirmation that puts you as a superstar, because sometimes then it's not believable.
People can smell that.
Yeah, people can smell it. You can smell it, and it doesn't feel real. And I feel like it just puts more pressure on you to be this perfect rock star. But instead, this is something I'll often start with people is, can you say, I'm learning how to? Yeah. Can you say, I'm capable of working on, I'm capable of learning? Can you use that in your affirmation? It's that ability to learn and the capacity to grow, which a lot of people do not give themselves credit for. They think if I'm not that already, I'll never be that. And it's, oh no, you have a great capacity to learn and grow into whatever you want to be.
I would say that's probably something I've struggled with because I come from a perfectionist background and a home where it was never good enough. So for me, it was always like, I was constantly hustling to try and prove myself to me and forget anybody else, but prove to me that I could do it. So I think that's definitely an important part of the conversation for sure.
I'm going to shift gears for a second. So you and I have known each other for a while now. And so I know all about Sarah Taylor and I know all about your community and what you do and just the absolute magic to the women's lives who are in your world. But let's take a moment to just talk about that for just a second so we can give some context before I throw us into some business questions here. So I always say that the most boring part of a podcast to me is when people drone on and on about all their qualifications and credentials and their whole long, what do you do? Because I don't know. I always zone out at that part. So I like to say, let's start with the LinkedIn version of what do you do? Let's bring some professional LinkedIn version. What would you say is what you do under that heading?
I'm a plus size personal trainer and motivator for plus size women.
I love that.
A nutshell.
Okay. So now if we said what's the like fun, playful version, if you were on stage with a bunch of 13-year-old girls at a school somewhere, what would you say?
That I get to work with women who society has told is not good enough and prove them wrong. I get to hold a mirror up and show them that they're amazing as they are and walk that journey with them, not just in fitness, but body, mind, and soul, so that they can live their best friggin' lives, because that is the key. I think so many people hate themselves and they don't do the things that they actually want. So I help them learn to love themselves so they can truly live what it is that they want. Go on that date, wear that swimsuit, go for the job they want, whatever it is, you can do it.
And that's a big part of your story is that you approached living life of your dreams and happiness on a weight loss first, got to that point of where you wanted to be at a weight loss perspective and realized you weren't happy and you weren't living life of your dreams and that something had to change on the inside.
So for me, that like at 21, I decided I was going to get skinny because that's what was going to solve all my problems. And I did 3 hours of cardio 6 days a week, threw up after every workout, got to my lowest weight, and I still absolutely hated myself. But then a lot of trauma happened in my life during that time. So my parents split up. It was a really messy divorce. I grew up as a pastor's kid, so that was traumatic in itself. And then shortly after, then met a guy who I married, and he was super abusive. And so just perpetuated this cycle of self-hatred. And obviously when I was doing all that cardio and had to stop, when my parents split, I had to work 2 full-time jobs while I was in college full-time. So all that time that I spent in the gym went away and all my habits creeped back up, all that negative self-talk. And for me, it wasn't until it was a week before my 2-year wedding anniversary where I woke up one day and I was like, I can't live another day in this pain. Like something has to change. Yeah. And for me, that was my first step in my journey to self-love. I told him he had to go or we had to work on things. And so he left. And that's when my healing journey started. And that's when I started discovering more about myself. That's when I started learning the tools that I teach my clients now. So when I teach my clients, I tell them, like, I've been doing more one-on-one coaching. And I'm like, the things we're going to work through aren't things I read in a book that philosophically work. These are things I actually walked through and found great result in, and literally have taken me from being divorced under 30, losing my job because the company I worked for went bankrupt, having my mom have to pay my rent and eating beans because I had no food, to now having owned 2 gyms and now 100% virtual, work from home, working with women, doing absolutely what I love. I've traveled all over the North America, modeling, speaking, appear on TV regularly, and living the life that I want. And now I'm going to be bringing a baby girl into the world who's going to know different about how amazing she is right from the start.
That is so much of the magic of what you bring to this world. I think as entrepreneurs, we start off to change the world. We start off to start a business. We have many reasons that we get going into the world of entrepreneurship. And I think what keeps most of us going is that ever-present desire to make the world a better place for other people based on what we've gone through or what we see.
And I think for me, like, there were things that led up to it. Like when I started off modeling, I was working full-time at that point. I was working in the software, in the nonprofit sector in software. So very different than what I do now, and was doing that full-time. I was really successful. I was one of our like top senior account managers, got promoted. But because I started doing the work that I was doing and working with women and sharing my story, I just wanted more.
Yeah.
And then one bad experience at a gym by somebody fat shaming me, I was like, we're not having this.
Yeah.
And that's what gave me my desire. So that combined with my why and solving a problem that I saw existed. And I think that's what a lot of business owners are. They see a problem that they want to fix, and then that becomes part of their why. And I think on those hard days, that's what we reflect back to is, why did I even start?
Why am I doing this? Do you ever play that game where you go, what if I just pack it in and just go back to a 9 to 5?
Yep. There have been many times.
I feel like I say this all the time to people when they feel that, because they feel such guilt or shame around that. I'm like, you're not even a real entrepreneur unless you think that at least twice a year. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
At minimum. Yeah. It's hard. Entrepreneurship is hard.
Yeah. And just before I found out I was pregnant, actually, I think I told you about this, but I was approached by a really big company with a very big salary. They had headhunted me. I didn't get the position. And I was very thankful because I found out I was pregnant and I was so sick. But I toyed with the idea of doing it because I was like, a steady income? I don't know what that is.
Yep. What's that?
Yeah. What is that?
I know for you too, with the pandemic, with the big C, you had to pivot in a very
3 times.
Yeah. Like a lot of pivoting from brick and mortar to online to even your offerings. What kept you going? Because I know tough. What kept you going during these big pivots?
Going from having a gym in Toronto to closing down, my community, they were freaking out. I was like, okay, now's your time to help people stay calm and provide some way for them to have some kind of relief.
Yeah.
They had invested in me and I was like, I have to do something.
Yeah.
And so within 12 hours of being forced to close down, I had an online offering.
Yeah.
And so our first class was March 18th, 2020. And then as it continued to go on, the space that I had was intimate on purpose because I didn't want it to be super intimidating for plus size women. But with the new regulations of social distancing, I was like, I'm not gonna be able to financially survive unless I offer 10 classes a day. And I can't physically do that. I know that I can't, I'm already working too much as it is. I can't do that. So I had to make the decision. I think I made the decision in July and prepared and announced in August that we were closing for good. I sold all of my equipment in 24 hours on Instagram. And then I built a membership site by myself in 4 days and launched a membership site. I did have to pivot how I was doing things. I made 2 different offerings. That's something else I've learned through all of this is yes, other people would like me to do other services, but I know I'm about to have a baby and I can't commit to give myself one-on-one to everybody.
Yeah.
And so knowing what I offer, the magic that I offer, and staying in my lane has been another part of journey. Even before I got pregnant, I found I injured my hamstring really bad that I couldn't stand or sit or anything.
Right. I forgot about that already.
And my family jokes of, Sarah, we tried to tell you to slow down for so long. You injured your hamstring. You still didn't listen because you kept going. And then you got knocked up. So now you really have to listen. So I had to pivot again going into virtual because I was doing live classes. I was teaching 9 classes a week. Yeah. And teaching virtual is very different than teaching in person because I was working out 9 times a week.
Yeah.
And my body was paying for it. So when I got vertigo about 14 or 15 weeks into my pregnancy, I had to stop all live classes.
Yeah.
So I had 2 days to basically update all the memberships to move them all down to on demand, make some modifications to the membership and continue to sell that way. And then also for me, one of my biggest lead generators is TikTok. And I was producing a ton of content, but being pregnant, I could hardly move.
Yes. Yep.
My normal self would have been like, Sarah, you need to be doing, Sarah, you need to do this. And for me, I was just like, you know what? I don't have a choice. I have to listen to my body. This baby is making me. And so I really just had to take a step back and be okay with taking a step back because I'm creating a human at this point. Like it's just this constant pivot and being okay with it.
The 2 things that really stood out to me that you just said, which is accepting what is and moving forward.
Yep.
Number 2 is that we all have this belief that we have to work ourselves into the ground to be successful and hustle 24/7 and over deliver and overdo and over deliver and overdo some more. And when we are forced to slow down and things don't fall apart, we realize we actually didn't have to work that hard. Tell me a little bit about no, okay, whatever that made you laugh, let's hear it.
It's just because like that's what this whole time for me being pregnant has been like. I was working so much and doing so much and I was burning out. I had to move places as part of it because I was teaching classes in the middle of my 1-bedroom condo. My boyfriend had to stay in the bedroom anytime I taught. So that wasn't going to work permanently. But then when we moved here and I had a designated office space, I had to set boundaries around how much I was going to work.
Yeah.
My boyfriend laughs because he's like, your boundaries were still 10 hours a day. Yeah, I mean, it's better than 12 or 14. But then getting pregnant, it was like, oh, I really had it wrong. And so for me, now that I'm like thinking about the future, I'm not saying I'm doing anything live until 2022. We'll see what happens in 2022. I'm not committing to nothing. I'm building systems and processes so that things can try and run because as a business owner, I can't really take a mat leave, but I do want to have some time off. So trying to create systems and ways to work as little as possible in the first little bit. And I've done a really good job of doing that, but I've had to come up with systems and processes in order to do that and minimize the time that I'm working. And now that I'm like, I'll have some really good days. And then the last 3 days have been really rough. I'm just really nauseous and in bed. If I pay for it for being over busy. So I have to put a cap of 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And for somebody who is working like an insane amount of time, it's a huge adjustment, but I also have to remember like,
were you not a little scared at the beginning of reducing your hours by that much?
Yep. Well, and especially because when I was like the first 4 months of pregnancy, I literally only taught classes and did the very bare minimum. I was just laying down. I was just so sick. And pregnancy is different than getting like sick with something because there is an end in sight. You know what it is, but I couldn't do it. And I just had to listen to my body. So it was definitely a unique situation.
It's unfortunate. Most of us require something major happening before we listen to our bodies and slow down.
Yeah. And I wish I listened way sooner because in all honesty, for me, COVID was a massive blessing in disguise, even though it's also been really horrible because I know that the world has been impacted in every possible way.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's a good thing, but for my personal situation, if I had continued going the way that I was pre-COVID, I'm pretty sure I would have ended up in the hospital due to stress.
100%.
I wasn't sleeping. I was about to claim bankruptcy. Like for me, it was a huge wake up call to like slow things down because I was just not doing well. Yeah. So for me, during the lockdowns, I focused more on my health and balance and sleeping. And I realized how much I was actually working and I didn't realize it before. And that is one of my probably biggest regrets is that I burned the candle at every which way I could.
You kept adding candles on and burning them
too. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like it was ridiculous.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a very relatable thing. And I think that the fear, and I think that the fear comes because we think that by working harder, it gives us a sense of control over
Mm-hmm.
our success. And for those of us that burn out, or those of us who have been in business for long enough to see what really makes us successful, what we realized is that working hard isn't what makes us successful. And actually, let me take that back. Working hard is essential. Being busy isn't
Yeah.
essential. You can work
Yeah.
hard for 3 hours a day and have a wildly successful and profitable business. Or you can
Mm-hmm.
be busy 10 and 15 hours a day, completely fall on your face, because it comes down to type of work that you're doing and the quality
Mm-hmm.
of work that you're doing. And one of my personal missions when I start like coaching with somebody or they come into my programs is to go through their to-do list and eliminate 90% of what they're doing, because no word of a lie, 90% of what new entrepreneurs do is not necessary, will not get them profitable. And so like,
Mm-hmm.
why are we doing it?
Yeah. And I think the other part to that too is your mindset. So I was doing much better and my expenses weren't as high not having an actual brick and mortar in Toronto, but expenses were still high and I still have to pay off all the loans from having a brick and mortar. So there was still stress, but there is a very distinct shift in October of 2020 where I worked with a friend of mine who was like, you need to get out of this place of this is so hard. I can't do this, because that's where I was, because I was like, I'm not making enough. And that's what I was focusing on. And so we worked really hard on redefining some of my things, going back to my why and starting to be grateful for the little things, taking time for me.
Yes.
And there was a very distinct shift in things then starting to flow through. So right after that, I had a video blow up on TikTok and my business doubled Black Friday weekend. And it was like, oh, whoa. And then other things just started happening. And it put me in a place that I was like, okay, when my hamstring happened, and it was like, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. And then I got pregnant. But it at least put me in this place of, instead of being, woe is me, this is so hard. I think that all that work also helped in this new phase of, it is what it is. Like, I can only do so much. I'm human through this stage of things. And so I think your mindset and protecting that is really important, because you've gotten those text messages from me of, I can't do this. And was just negative about everything, because I was so overwhelmed. I was so stressed. It was all I thought about. And I think that's the importance of having the balance in your work-life balance, because I wasn't having it. Like my boyfriend would say, all you do is think about your business. Do you think about anything else? And at the time I wasn't like, that's all I thought about. Everything revolved around how I can work it around my business.
The theme of this podcast is the Work Less, Play More podcast, because we need to start getting comfortable with letting go of the control and the belief that we have to work all the time. And instead think about how entrepreneurship is that vehicle for building the life of your dreams. It's not meant to take over your life. And that's what you were just saying. Like, it literally was everything. And when we get to that point of intense control and the need to drive ourselves into the ground, we stop listening to what our bodies need, sure, but what our business needs. We interfere with the synchronistic things and the opportunities that come to us when we're so focused on driving ourselves. So when you think about that for yourself now, work less, play more, what does that mean to you?
I think I had this realization of, what is the point of having my own business and doing what I love if it's sucking the life out of me? That was a pretty big realization. And I think for me, that was one of the biggest things that made me like be okay with having to take a break. I wish it didn't mean that I was forced into it with a hamstring injury and getting knocked up, but it is what it is. I've learned my lesson. And so for me, now knowing that I'm going to be on the other side of things, I'm not going to always be sick. This baby will come out and I will feel different than I probably ever have in my life. And knowing that, I have to prepare myself for, I'm also going to have a child to now take care of. I've always wanted to be a mom. That's what I wanted to do. So for me, being a mom is something really special. I don't want it to be like how I was growing up where my dad worked all the time.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to be very mindful and not commit to things. So I have people approach me about things all the time. And I'm like, I'm not teaching live classes right now. I'm not even going to try and have a conversation with you. I'm putting in those boundaries in place now. And I'm going to have to be careful, because my nature is to work like crazy since I was 21. And so for me, this is like years of undoing, but thinking about going into balance, especially because I can't take a maternity leave.
Yeah.
But I still want to have that time to bond. So I want to find ways that I can incorporate grazing my daughter and empowering her. But I also want to have time just with her that's not on social media or for my clients to see. And so it will be really important for me to have distinct time. So I'm very thankful I have support where like my mom is, I'll come for a day a week and that might be the day that I work a lot. I'm going to have to come up with a plan of having that work-life balance because I want to be present in my family, and that's really important to me.
Well, and I think that back to the whole thing about it being scary, this giving up control and working so hard. I don't have any kids. So many of my friends have had kids or are having kids in the past few years. And I know the shit that they've had to go through to really let go of the control in their business and the overworking, because their priorities have completely shifted. And so I feel like all these things have been really preparing you.
Because to be honest, when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, this is going to be great for business. I can do pregnancy wear. I can pitch brands.
Yeah.
I can't do nothing. I even registered for a course for pre and postnatal personal training. I haven't even cracked open the book because I've just been so sick. And so it's really shifted my perspective and, oh, this child is now in charge at this point.
The business is taking a back seat for a little while.
Yeah. And that's okay. And so being okay with that, I think the first, like when I first found out I was pregnant and then I got really sick, I think I was mourning that like the Sarah that I know is no longer going to exist. And I was the last person to start talking about planning for a child. And my mom was always like, when do I get a grandbaby? And I was like, can you stop asking me or I'm going to stop talking to you? And my mom and I are really close because it wasn't a priority for me. My priority was my business. And now it's, nope, that's not going to be my priority. It's still going to be my baby, one of my babies. But this baby growing inside me is going to take precedent. So.
They're going to be the center of attention for a while. For folks that are listening that are starting to really connect to this idea of being the face of your business, having the confidence, working on yourself and bringing that work into the business, and this letting go of the control to be all things to all people and hustle, making space for a multifaceted you, not just a business owner. If they're sitting here going, I want that. I want all the things that Sarah is talking about. What do you think is the most important mind shift that they start working on today?
I think two things. I think it's making sure your why. Really making it clear. If you have to put it somewhere, like behind my computer is a wall, and I have a bunch of things that I have as reminders for myself.
What are they? Let's hear them.
One of them is you are built to handle the pressure that comes along with your calling. So for me, it's like constant reminders. A lot of them are scripture verses. I have my affirmations, and I also have like my vision board of the brands I want to work with and that kind of thing. But I think it's connecting with your why do you do what you do? Because anytime you're struggling, that's what you're going to have to come back to. And then I think the other piece is really digging deep and making sure that you're healed, you're whole, you're taking care of yourself. You can't be a help to other people if you're not doing well. I had people tell me, I thought you're really mad at me based on how you were with me. And it was because I was so stressed out. Had nothing to do with the person. I just was so stressed. That comes off to people. And so for me, it's been through this whole time of being in lockdown for so long, it's forced me to work on myself. It's forced me to have an evening routine, put my phone away, connect with myself, connect back with my faith, connect with my partner, all of those things. And I think that it's really important that regardless of what your business does, whether it's being as successful as you want or not, you have to be okay. And you have to actively put that work in. And I think that's the part that I missed for the first few years of my business. And I would say that's probably one of the gifts that I've received in the last year was taking that time to work on me, focus on my sleep, focus on getting the right foods in my system and being nourished, body, mind, and soul.
What I just heard you say is, if you want to be successful in business, it all starts with you. It all starts with the internal work. Not your strategy, not your branding, not your social media presence. It starts with what makes me feel good. Where do I need to work on my own confidence or self-love? And how can I have that level of balance and ease within myself that is then reflected in my business and in my business relationships?
Yeah, because even when working with my clients, I'm constantly on them about, okay, you've got to build these habits into your life so they become a natural thing. So then you can do the things that you want. And so if you don't have that foundation, all the branding in the world isn't going to help. Like, I have great branding. I'm on TV a lot. I'm very active on social media. I work with a ton of brands, but when I was not doing well, my business was also not doing well. And so I think that is a very clear thing that I saw. And I saw the shift of how I resonated with my ideal client when I was able to show up in a better headspace and not so stressed out. And it wasn't all about transactions. I could connect authentically with people. And then you are also living in a place of peace rather than a place of anxiety.
And all the magic happens straight up. For folks that are listening, when you're done here, I want you to take a moment to just maybe close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and just look at where you are in peace in your life and in your business and where you are in chaos or pressure. And start to ask yourself, where can I take my foot off the gas and maybe just let this go for a while? As Sarah has just said, things won't fall apart, but they might actually open up in really interesting and magical ways that are so much better for you. Just take that foot off the gas and just see what you can drop.
Yeah. And because I think at the end of the day, what it comes back to is if you don't, and you're currently miserable, what's the point?
What are we doing here?
Yeah. What's the point?
And we don't have to be miserable. You don't have to be miserable. No. You really, truly don't. Life is by your design. How do you want your life to look? Entrepreneurship is a tool for building your dream life. How do you want your life to look? How can entrepreneurship support that? Not consume you, not eat you alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So Sarah, where can folks connect with you?
My Instagram and TikTok are the.sarahtaylor, and then fitnessbysarahtaylor.com. I also have a YouTube, which is the Sarah Taylor as well. So I've got like free fitness videos. I also do like self-love stuff, fashion, beauty. Basically, I'm a resource for plus size women is I hope.
I love it. And obviously all of the links are going to be in the show notes. So y'all will be able to go ahead and click on all the things. Sarah is a magical human being. I absolutely recommend that you follow her everywhere. Although you may see her a little less for a little while. Sarah, heart for showing up for her community, really meaningful ways. Get in on that. Tell us, as we wrap up here, like really, what are you excited about right now in your business? What are you talking about to anyone that will listen?
I recently launched a personal coaching program, and it's super budget friendly for clients. I'm finding that a lot of women are just struggling with actually keeping habits, and there's a lot of self-sabotage. There's also like a lot of internal talk, and sometimes just having an on-demand guided resource is not enough. So I've started working with clients. It's completely individualized. Some clients are wanting to work through the actual self-love and re-recording the negative tape. And so we're doing active work on that. I have some clients who are like trying to repair their relationship with food. And that's an interesting one because I'm not one for prescribing a diet or that's anti what I do. But this one client was already tracking what she was eating every day. And I was like, okay, well, continue this for 2 weeks because I just want to see, I'm not seeing what you're actually eating. And she's eating like 1,000 calories less than her body should actually have at her age and her size, because diet culture has told us if you're plus size and you want to do anything with your body, eat less. And so it really has been interesting and eye-opening to help women reclaim parts of their life. Another one, just like having a hard time showing up for herself. So it's interesting to be able to work with women on things that I've personally walked through and give them resources. So I'm loving doing that.
I love that. All right. We'll make sure that we include that in the show notes as well so that folks can learn more about that. Sarah, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and for, as always, bringing your realness and your wisdom and just your love. This has been great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you want to learn more about joining my community for new entrepreneurs and influencers who want to ditch the busy work and discover how to work less and play more all the way to 6 figures and beyond, please visit theradicalconnector.com. Check out today's show notes for all the juicy resources we covered. If you loved what you've heard, subscribe and leave a review. Happy connecting. I will see you online.